This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. There has been one question that a lot of Browns fans have been asking, and I don't think we've gotten an answer to, which is, what exactly was the original plan for the Cleveland Browns at quarterback after Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles the second time, right? That's when I assume that they decided to permanently move on from the idea of Deshaun Watson as a starter. And look, as much as people try to like scare you and jump scare you about Deshaun Watson playing, it's November 18th and they're still not even talking about opening up his 21-day window. Every time they get asked about him, they just say they have no update. They don't answer anything. They clearly don't factor this man into their plans in the future and probably would prefer to not see him for the rest of the year. Like, I think the only way you really see Deshaun is if it's the choice between him or like Bailey Zapp. But as long as Shador or Dylan Gabriel's on the roster, I think that they're not going to see any use of giving those reps to Deshaun. They know what Deshaun looks like in this offense. They weren't satisfied with it, and I don't think they need to be curious about what he looks like post double Achilles and throwing shoulder injury, right? Like, that's just, I don't think anybody's really that curious about that thing. But the question remains, it's like, hey, what was the plan? Because it feels like everything the Browns did when it came to quarterback, they did under some sort of duress this offseason, from hindsight, looking back, being 2020, right? Like, You go back, the first move the Browns made at quarterback was this trade with DTR and Kenny Pickett to get Kenny Pickett. And some of us were thinking, well, that can't be the only thing they're going to do. Some of us thinking that that was the move. They traded for Kenny Pickett. They're going to make Kenny Pickett the starter, and they're just going to call this season whatever it is, maybe try to get a reclamation project out of this, whatever, right? That was what felt like the original plan. Then we get closer to the draft, and the Browns signed Joe Flacco. Now, the Joe Flacco signing was always a little strange, right? There were all these reports about how Joe Flacco needed to be convinced that the Deshaun Watson stuff wasn't going to still be a thing for him while he was in Cleveland. Little did Joe Flacco know, it was definitely not going to be a thing for him in Cleveland because he wouldn't even be here past week 4. But he wanted to make sure that wasn't the case. There seemed to be some hesitancy for the Browns to be interested in Joe Flacco, right? And overall, if you look at what the Browns' philosophy at quarterback was, it was like, okay, well, let's just fill the position as cheap as possible. So maybe Joe Flacco makes sense there. You go after Kenny Pickett. Those are your two guys. That's what the Browns season is going to look like. You're going to have a competition in camp between Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco. Maybe you draft the rookie quarterback, and that's the room, right? And then you kind of settle it in there. And that felt like the plan. And then fast forward to the draft, you draft Dylan Gabriel. Now, the only reason this was a surprise was because Shador Sanders was still on the board. But, shout out to people on Twitter who pointed this out to me. It seemed like the Browns had Dylan Gabriel as number 2 on their board. Now, to be fair to the Browns, it's a pretty shitty quarterback class. So I could see how that happened. They weren't the only people who had Dylan Gabriel high on their board. I wouldn't have had Dylan Gabriel number 2 on my board, but hey, they did the interviews, they did the pre-draft circuit, they like Dylan Gabriel a lot. They take Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. Fair enough. Right? Hey, look, I don't have to agree with every draft pick you make. There's always a draft pick that the Browns make that I'm not a fan of. That was the draft pick where I was like, this is the Siaki Ika one for me. You go back and watch my reaction. Wasn't a big fan of the selection.
But hey, you have a difference of opinion there. Cool. You take Dylan Gabriel. And then they swung back around in the 5th round and got Shedeur Sanders. Now, in hindsight, drafting both of them was a mistake. Either you draft one of them or you draft none of them, right? Because what drafting Shedeur did was add another layer to this quarterback room that, quite frankly, was unnecessary. Now, I think the Browns did it at the time because they were convinced they were going to be a better football team. Like, I think the Browns thought that, hey, look, we could get a special year out of Joe Flacco, or maybe we get a Sam Darnold-like reclamation from Kenny Pickett, and we can shoot this thing up and make the playoffs. I truly believe that's what the Browns coaching staff thought, that they could get out this offense. It did not happen. It didn't even come close to happening. Well, you can argue that the Browns lost a couple of one-score games this year, and they really should have this record if they were more competent, but them not being more competent is a huge part of that story. So, no, it didn't come close to happening. And because that was the case, you opened up a whole can of worms that ended up being a problem for everybody involved, right? Because if this had gone the way that the Browns wanted it to go, where one of the veterans wins the job and the veteran was good and kept the job, then we wouldn't be arguing about who's getting what reps. We wouldn't be debating about who should be starting. We wouldn't be doing any of this. And I think that's how they thought it would go. And that's why they felt like they could take the extra quarterback, the extra flyer on the position. Also, I think the Browns were assuming, and wrongfully so, that they weren't going to have top draft position in 2026 because they were just going to win too many games to have a top 10 pick. So maybe they were also thinking, hey, we need to have options at quarterback to potentially string us over to 2027. But the reality of the Browns situation is Kenny Pickett got traded in training camp. Joe Flacco got traded week 4. Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders are starting right now. And the Browns are almost certainly going to be in a position to where if they want to, they can take a quarterback at the top of this draft. Was there not a plan for the quarterback position? Or did the plan fail miserably? That's what I keep asking myself. Was the plan what I just said right there? Or was there just no plan and they just wung it for the whole season? There are some things about this that concern me. There are some evaluation elements of this that are very concerning to me. I'll talk about that real quick, but let me thank my sponsor, Sleeper. So we walked over everything that happened, right? And because the Browns weren't good or as good as they thought they were going to be, they ended up having to play the rookie quarterbacks a lot earlier than they thought they were going to have to play those rookie quarterbacks. And they kind of, the Browns did this thing this year where they kept putting themselves in a bad look position. Because I mentioned this in week 4. Joe Flacco had been playing bad enough to where you had to justifiably bench him. And the problem with that is that there was no backup veteran that you could put in when Joe Flacco was struggling. So instead of it being like, oh, we're going to throw Kenny Pickett in for a couple of weeks and then we're going to go back to Joe Flacco, it was like, hey, we're going to have to go to Dylan Gabriel and turn the entire team over to Dylan Gabriel, right? That's what's happened since the Joe Flacco benching. It wasn't like a simple replacement of Joe. It was, hey, we're turning this thing over to the rookie now. And then when Dylan Gabriel's in a position to where he's trying to get his bearings as an NFL quarterback, get his first games in, he is now going to be judged like a veteran quarterback amongst the fan base because, much like Joe Flacco, he has a rookie behind him backing him up. And the one thing about the NFL that I have learned over the last few years, right? DTR, Deshaun Watson, but Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, There is no recipe for fan discontent of a quarterback more than bad quarterback play and having a rookie behind him, right? Because when you have a rookie behind a quarterback who's not playing good, everybody wants to see the rookie. And instead of Dillon Gabriel being treated by the fan base as a rookie quarterback, he got treated as a veteran quarterback because he was in a position of a veteran quarterback where he's starting, but there's a rookie behind him. And the same dynamic that happened to Joe Flacco is starting to eat up Dillon Gabriel. Now, Dillon got a concussion. We're going to see Shedeur play, and maybe Shedeur plays well enough to where he just takes the job for the rest of the season. It wouldn't be hard to hit that bar, but so far throughout his 2 quarters of football, he hasn't hit it yet. Or, maybe Shedeur plays so poorly that people just don't want to see it anymore. I highly doubt that would happen in just one game, but, you could mess up to that point to where people would be more lenient about this whole thing. But either way, you put Dillon Gabriel in a pretty shitty position. Shedeur is put in an awkward position because he's being asked to develop in a quarterback room that did not have room or a lot of space for him. And because you drafted Shedeur, you condensed the amount of space that quarterback room had for Dillon Gabriel. Like, you ended up not doing good on both of those guys. Like, if your priority was developing Dillon Gabriel, then how did drafting Shedeur Sanders help that? If your priority is developing Shedeur Sanders, then how did taking Dillon Gabriel before him help that? Just doesn't seem helpful. And I was having this conversation on Twitter with I think it was Anthony Reinhardt. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. Yeah, I was having this conversation on Twitter with Anthony Reinhardt, and he was talking about, hey, look, it's been an analytics model and a team-building model that, like, drafting 2 quarterbacks could be beneficial. My only thing is that I understand on paper, because when the Browns took Shedeur and Dillon on paper, I was okay with it. I understand it on paper, but living through this experience, I think there's some caveats you need to make. If you want to draft 2 quarterbacks in a draft, I think they have to be selected in 2 separate areas of the draft. And what I mean by that is you can't have similar expectations for both these quarterbacks, right? If you take 2 quarterbacks in the draft, you got to do it like the Commanders did in 2012, which is like first round pick, second pick of the draft, RG3. Okay, that's the guy we hope to be the future face of the franchise. 4th round pick, 5th round pick, Kirk Cousins, right? I think if you do that, the expectations are clear-cut enough amongst the coaching staff and the fan base that you're not going to end up being in weird situations, but you can't mix the two. You can't draft somebody that people thought was a first-round pick, regardless of if that evaluation was correct, and then have somebody ahead of them who not a lot of people thought was a first-round pick, but prioritize that guy, because you're just asking for people to have that debate all season long. There's also the question of, Kenny Pickett was the best flyer you thought you could take? I can understand Daniel Jones was too expensive, Sam Darnold was too expensive, but Kenny Pickett, like, that's what the coaching staff put together their recommendation for Andrew Berry to go get a quarterback, and Kenny Pickett's what we came back with? And then our backup plan was Joe Flacco, which I thought was a better idea than Kenny Pickett. And then Dillon Gabriel, really the second quarterback on the board, huh? These are the things that concern me when it comes to this coaching staff being continually involved in the evaluation of the players that the Browns draft on the offensive side of the ball. And this is part of the reason why I think Kevin's got to go and his staff has got to go on the offensive side of the ball, because the way that Andrew Berry works is he is a collaborative guy. He is going to collaborate with the position coaches on the both sides of the ball. And if those guys aren't giving solid recommendations, then the drafts aren't going to be amazing. And this offensive staff has consistently not given solid recommendations, and that has hurt the scouting process for the Cleveland Browns on the offensive side of the ball. You're going to spend a lot of resources this offseason on offense. I don't think we should waste time and money and draft resources that are precious getting the recommendations of guys who have failed to give good recommendations in the past. Like maybe you keep Deuce, right? Maybe you like Tommy Reese. You keep Tommy Reese, but you got to move on. You really got to move on from some of these other, like the Kenny Pickett being the first option here, and then Dylan Gabriel being your first option in the draft. Knowing how that works, that makes me want to move on from the coaching staff even more. But that's my thoughts about this. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. What do you think was the original plan for the Cleveland Browns to start this year? Let me know in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.